Well, good evening to you and welcome inside Pinnacle Bank Arena, of course, home of this year's 95th Nebraska FFA State Convention. Just moments ago, 7 individuals heard their names called as they were part of this year's Nebraska FFA State Officer team. In just moments, we'll have the chance to meet them.
Over 7,000 FFA members made the trip to Lincoln this year, celebrating their accomplishments, participating in workshops, meeting all sorts of members. And now we get to meet this year's new team. Bryce?
We'll do so right now. We'll have our first Nebraska FFA State Officer step up and introduce yourself as well as your chapter.
Yeah, my name is Bethany Nichols, and I'm from the Bridgeport FFA chapter.
Tell me a little about your background and your involvement in the FFA.
Yeah, so I love agriculture. It's where I grew up, and so I've done livestock judging and employment skills during FFA.
The last name Nichols is familiar for the Nebraska FFA. Any relation to former State Officer Braden Nichols?
Yeah, he's my uncle.
So what does it mean to you to have this role? You saw your uncle serve in that capacity, and now you get to serve in this. What's that mean to you?
Yeah, it means so much to me. My whole life, I was a little like 7 or 8 year old when Brandon had it, and I've looked up to him since then, and I've wanted it since then. So it's just cool to carry on the tradition. We're the only 2 that have had it from Bridgeport, so it's really cool.
What are you most excited about for the next year?
Yeah, definitely just getting to meet everybody and hearing a bunch of FFA members' stories about what their agricultural life is and just making an impact on kids that I get to see all the time.
Well, congratulations to you, Alex. I will send it over to you as we meet another one of the Nebraska FFA State Officers.
Yes, coming up is Nebraska FFA State Vice President Keaton Valentine from the David City FFA chapter. Walk us through your process of what it was like to decide to run for state office.
It was really tough. I didn't want to do it at first, honestly. It wasn't until about January where Lexi convinced me to apply, and so I applied, and it was the best choice I've probably made in a very long time.
So talk about your FFA experiences. What do you do?
In FFA, I do a lot of speaking events, and in those speaking events, I continue to meet others as I go with them, and I grow myself as well.
So what are you most excited for in serving in this role this next coming year?
I'm really excited to be able to travel across the state and meet other members, and I'm also really excited to be able to inspire them and encourage them to grow in themselves.
Keaton, you think about your next year. What do you think your message might be?
Take the opportunities that you have, because those will open up the doors for you no matter where you go in life.
That's your Nebraska FFA State Vice President Keaton Valentine of the David City FFA chapter. Bryce?
Well, let's meet another one of the Nebraska FFA State Vice Presidents. We'll have you introduce yourself, your name, and your chapter.
I'm Abigail Hodges, and I'm from the Johnson Brock FFA chapter.
I'm thinking back in history. When's the last time, do you know, when Johnson Brock had a state FFA officer?
Never. I'm the first one.
What does that mean to you? You're the very first state FFA officer from the Johnson Brock chapter. What's that mean?
It's everything. My chapter is so supportive, and they are honestly the reason I'm here today. I love them all.
You heard your name called on this stage just a few moments ago. What are the emotions you were feeling during that moment?
Shock, disbelief, excitement, and it's overall unreal.
I know it's early to ask this question, but what are you most excited about for the next year?
Being around this great group of people, I've gone through so many interviews with them, and just being able to serve Nebraska FFA with them is going to be the best time of my life, I already know.
The very first Nebraska FFA State Officer from Johnson Brock. She joins us up here, just elected Nebraska FFA State Vice President.
Up next is your Nebraska FFA State Secretary, Alex Boudreau from the Minden FFA chapter. What are you involved in FFA? Tell us more.
I've been a lot throughout high school. Livestock management's a big one. Livestock judging, agronomy. I had employment skills this year, so a lot throughout high school.
Very involved. Walk us through that decision then to make the big jump and decide to run for state office.
Yeah, well, I really wasn't considering early on, and I had a good friend kept pestering about it until it got to the fall, and I was like, you know what, I should probably consider this, and I went for it. So,
your name was called from the Minden FFA chapter. What went through your head?
Well, I remember staring at the floor in the big circle and just absorbing it and rooting for my teammates and all those guys that were down there. So yeah, it's just surreal.
What have you learned about yourself through this process?
I can do it. I've learned a lot. I've learned not just about myself, I guess. I can do it. I can do more things than I thought I can.
All right. You get to serve as Nebraska FFA State Secretary this next year. What do you think your message to those FFA members will be?
In the relationships in your life, don't take them for granted. Take every relationship you have and use them to your advantage and build as much relationships as you can, because that will get you through life.
All right, great things to come from your Nebraska FFA State Secretary from the Minden FFA chapter, Alex Boudreau. Bryce?
Well, let's meet another one of your Nebraska FFA State Vice Presidents hailing from the Hay Springs FFA chapter. Let's have you introduce yourself. Tell us about your background in agriculture.
Yeah, so I'm Braden Banger from the Hay Springs FFA chapter, and throughout my life, I've grown up on the family farm and ag production. We've grown sheep, cattle, and then diversified crop operation as well, such as corn and wheat. So
let's share with our viewers tonight, where is the Hay Springs FFA chapter located?
So the Hay Springs FFA chapter is about as far west as you can possibly get. It's in the Northwest Panhandle. We're about 20 miles east of Shattern.
I asked this question a moment ago. Do you remember, or do you know the last state officer, if there was one, from your FFA chapter?
So I was actually fortunate enough the first time my chapter had FFA was when I was a freshman, and they had it probably till the late 60s, but I'm not sure if they had a state officer.
So take me back. When did you decide you wanted to serve in this capacity and run for state FFA office?
So throughout FFA, I've grown so much as a person, and I was lucky enough to have incredible advisors and lifelong mentors I've met along the way that have just changed my life. And I know that there's so many members across the entire state that have so much potential, and I can't wait to help them find that throughout this year.
Well, congratulations to you representing one of the most furthest west points in the state of Nebraska. You can get one of your Nebraska FFA State Vice Presidents.
Up next is your Nebraska FFA State President, Thomas Perrin of the Ogallala FFA chapter. The last name to be called, you were patiently waiting. What went through your mind as your name was called?
Just a flood of emotions. It was, questioning myself. Did I get it? Did I not? And just patiently waiting for that name to be called.
Was there a moment when you decided state office is what I want to run for?
Definitely. Halfway through my junior year, I sat down with myself and I'm like, is this something I want to undertake? Is this something I want to go through with? And that split second decision was something that I just jumped on, and I'm glad I did.
All right. So tell me a little bit more about your involvement in FFA. What do you do?
I do an extensive amount of contests. I do employment skills, ag demo, vet science, and sometimes, on the contrary, food science.
All right. Tell us about your involvement in agriculture otherwise then.
I come from a row crop family farm in western Nebraska. I've been surrounded by agriculture all my life, and it's just something I've grown to love throughout my life.
What are you most excited for your year of service, Thomas?
Definitely getting to serve the state of Nebraska and the FFA organization and meet these new people throughout the state.
All right. I know it's early, but do you think you have a message for these Nebraska FFAers?
I'm sure you've heard it before, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you think you're going to take a shot, take it, because it's totally worth it.
All right. A big congratulations to your Nebraska FFA State President from the Ogallala FFA chapter, Thomas Perrin. Bryce.
We'll round it out here with the seventh and final Nebraska FFA State Officer we'll introduce you tonight. Congratulations to you. We'll have you introduce yourself as well as your FFA chapter.
Hi, I'm Paige Bunn, and I'm from the North Bend FFA chapter.
What folks at home can't see on this live stream is the supporters out here in the crowd. What's it mean to you? Of course, your teammates as well, but to have these people waiting, so anxious to talk to you.
It's an amazing feeling. It's almost indescribable, just meeting all these people like through the convention, and also my own chapter backing me up is great.
What'd you think when your name was called?
I didn't believe it at first. It kind of took a moment of just realization, then turning around and running up here.
This is quite an experience running for state FFA office, 2 different rounds. Talk about some of the emotions that have come out through this process.
There definitely was some high and lows, but I definitely found, my strengths, and I found, comfort in my friends that I've made. And, overall, I wouldn't trade that experience for the world.
What kind of message do you hope to share with the membership of the Nebraska FFA over the next year?
I hope to share that agriculture is something for everyone, not just our farmers. It's such an amazing organization, and there's so much you can take away from it.
It's a great message to share, and a message that I know a lot of them will have over the next year as we meet this year's Nebraska FFA State Officers. Alex, it's always fun to hear the excitement and the energy in the room and to meet these new leaders.
We've got a great group at hand, and I'm sure Nebraska FFA is just as excited to meet them. So good things are to come.
Yeah, I shared they've got a whole lot of folks anxious to meet them and give them some hugs. So we'll let them do it as we wrap up our coverage of this year's 95th Nebraska FFA State Convention. So for the final time, I'm Bryce Doeschot, joined with Makovicka here inside Pinnacle Bank Arena. We are clear. Thank you, folks.
Excellent.